Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Vivid Voltage, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's Vivid Voltage deck, we are going to be looking at a greens build of Raichu with the new Electrode as a means of accelerating energy. The basic concept being that why use Full Blitz when we can completely skip that step now and go straight into Raichu that has, in theory, just a little bit more damage output behind it for the most part with your 160 baseline, which is actually way better than 150 for obvious reasons against the Dene. And the fact that you get Paralysis on top is way more disruptive. And we're also, giving up a couple prize cards as we have seen with Magneton and Mismagius. This can, in Green's deck specifically, be seen as an upside rather than a downside because we can control reset stamps, and there's not many things stronger than Paralysis alongside a reset stamp. It's one of the best combos that Picarom's had this whole time, and we're going to try and replicate the same thing here with Electrodes blowing themselves up and forcing your opponents to get through two Raichus. That's pretty much the entire deal here. So let's get straight into it. First of all, with the Pokemon, and it really is a Raichu deck. This is what we're all in on. We are completely focused on the two attacks of this Raichu. A couple important notes about ChuChu. One thing that I really like about this card, compared to just a traditional Picarom, is that you naturally have 20 additional hit points, and you do have that resistance to metal. So even ADP buffed Zacians can't one-bang you. That's always been an issue of Picarom. You've always been forced to play Big Charms and always fallen prey to your opponent playing a damage modifier or playing Tool Scrapper, and just having the natural bulk on the ChuChu makes you immediately way better against ADP Zacian, which is like a really, really big deal. The Tandem Shock is a very solid attack. For 2 lightning and a colorless, you do 80, and if this Pokemon was on your bench and became your active Pokemon this turn, you do 80 more damage and also paralyze, which is a really good deal. There are, yes, a lot of decks playing high switch counts, but there are still a handful of archetypes out there that are just relying on special energies and stadiums to retreat. There's a bunch of Eternatus lists that are just using Hiding Darkness energy and Dark City, for example. ADPs are playing like a ton of switches, but even then you're making them continually dig for extra things and add steps to their process, which is always a big deal. And this Paralysis gets way better as the game progresses. Once you've blown up a couple of Electrodes, once a Raichu's gone down, that's when the Stamp plus Paralysis can be a free turn for you, literally, which is just absolutely insane. And then we also have the Lightning Ride GX attack. For 2 lightning and a colorless still, you do 150 damage and you switch with one of your benched Pokemon. If you go all the way to 5 energies onto yourself, you can do 250 damage. So again, very, very solid number. And it can be used, pre or post Tandem Shock to protect our guy. And again, when you're combining it with stamps, you're making life more difficult for the opponent. You can do some prize denial at the same time. We are playing Lillie's Pokédoll in here to try and, again, just get some freedom, some free turns off people, basically, is what we're looking for here. And that's really the emphasis of this deck. We're trying to get free turns through Paralysis, through Lightning Ride, through Crushing Hammers as well. So we're really trying to just buy turns throughout the entire game from the start, really. So then we have this new card combo from the latest set, Vivid Voltage. It's the 4/3 line of Electrode in here with that Buzzap generator. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may search your deck for 2 lightning energy, attach them to one of your lightning Pokemon in any way that you like, or sorry, any of your lightning Pokemon in any way that you like, very versatile, and shuffle your deck. And if you search your deck in this way, you knock out your Electrode. So you're immediately giving off a prize card, but you're able to search the deck for energy cards, which is really good. It's deck thinning. We know how good that can be through like Full Blitz, etc. It's really nice in Green's decks as well because you are tutoring the entire game. You're not really filtering cards out of your deck too often, so Electrode does that role for us quite nicely. And it's obviously powering up our Raichus when otherwise we are just manually attaching through the game and hoping that Tapu, Koko, Prism Star is doing us a pretty good job. So that's what it's all about there. Onto the trainers now. We are playing 3 copies of Reset Stamp. I do think this deck is pretty heavily focused on the Reset Stamps. Paralysis is just such a big win con in combination with this card that I wanted to have a very high count and a lot of access to the card. We are playing 2 copies of Switch, as well as 2 copies of Air Balloon. Obviously, you want to continually move between your ChuChus, if possible, and even with that Lightning Ride option, these Switches and Air Balloons are going to be very important. Like I said, 2 copies of Lillie's Pokédoll. It's essential when you are trying to do that Lightning Ride turn, but also very good in those early turns as well, to protect your Raichu from early chip damage in certain matchups. Obviously, you're very afraid of the likes of Eternatus if your hammers aren't working for you, so trying to defend yourself is going to be important. 2 copies of Pokemon Communication to get your Electrodes into play. You could certainly consider 1 Evo Incense in here, but I think it's so narrow that I'm preferring Com in general, because we already have 3 tag calls on the list as well that you can see there, which means oftentimes you can tag call for additional Pokemon and then have Com accessible to you. We are only playing 12 Pokemon, so it's not like always live, the Pokemon Communication, but I feel like with the amount of tag calls and quick balls, we can make the comms as live as the Evo Incense for the most part, and it has slight upside in the early turns because it's extra outs to Voltorbs, which is, you know, what you need to get started in the first place. 3 tag calls. Obviously, we are going to be having a tag call engine. It's often paired in a greens list, and it can also access our Raichus very early, which is great. The 4 quick balls, like I said, we're looking for Voltorbs early because this is a great way to accelerate, and the quick ball can get us towards Tapu, Koko, Prism Star. Also provides some nice discard synergy for us. We do want to put some Lightnings in the discard pile, and, you know, anytime we have excess Voltorbs and Electrodes, you'll never blow up 3 Electrode really, unless you're in a really, really strange spot where possibly the extra damage of a Lightning Ride would win you the game in a certain situation. You're usually looking to blow up 2 as your maximum. Koko finds its way to the lost zone, and then you're forcing your opponent through 2 Raichus, which is the whole core concept here. So yeah, that's why we're having such a high count of those quick balls. We are playing 4 copies of Crushing Hammer. Like I said, we have so much frustrating options in here. Crushings are just super solid at slowing down all sorts of archetypes, and again, forcing your opponent to dig deeper through their deck. Sometimes it's forcing more researches out of the opponent, and that's when they're dumping their excess switch cards, etc. And it's all just going to help work towards that late game strategy of Reset Stamp being a real headache for them. And then finally, we are playing 2 copies of Power Plants. Nothing better than Stamp Plants, because you're hurting so many additional outs from the opponent. You basically shut off Quick Balls, Dedenes, Communications. You know, for the most part, it means they can still get like Crobats and Eldergosses, etc. But at least you're stopping Dedenne, and that's obviously a very good deal. It can also be used proactively if need be. Again, for slowing down combo decks that are relying on Dede change, Power Plant in the right moments can just be very painful. And it's obviously very good against Mewtwo as well. Mewtwo without this Power Plant would be a very awkward matchup because they don't have too much difficulty reaching that 260 multiple times over. So having Power Plant in here to try and balance that out, alongside, again, Stamp Paralysis, those sorts of plays, they're all going to be huge headaches for Mewtwo. So yeah, that's what we're using in the deck. For supporters, we're playing a couple copies of Boss's Orders to try and pick things off. Obviously, 160 is a good break point of damage for us. It means we can cash in on Dedenes and finish things off as well. Then we have our Tag Call package. We have 1 copy of Mallow Lana for additional switching outs, which can help us, again, pivot between our ChuChus, which is obviously very good. 1 Guzma Hala, which can access Speed Lightning, which is a busted card, Air Balloon, which is super good for the deck as well, and Power Plant, which is A, a counter stadium, and B, a huge headache for people, so early Guzma Hala is never a bad thing. And we're also playing 3 copies of Cynthia Caitlin, usually looking to recover Green's Exploration, because it's such an insane engine that you build around, but can also get back the other things that you can see on the screen here. And then we have the maximum counts of Green's Exploration herself, because she's so dang versatile. She's helping us get towards those Electrodes in the first place, helping us get the stamps on the right turns, the Pokédoll on the right turns. All of those plays are accessible through the greens. It even gets the Tag Call engine up and rolling as well. So yeah, super versatile card that you're going to try and spam throughout the game, and there's what the deck's all built around, to be honest. We do have 1 ability in the deck, which is Koko Prism Star, but I'm hoping with the number of natural switch outs that we have already in the deck, and the discard synergy options that we do have with the tag team supporters and the quick balls, that you can discard a Lightning early whilst searching for Pokemon, and then you know, by like turn 2, hopefully Green is online, and obviously Electrodes always instantly knock themselves out, so Greens should be live basically the entire game, and that's another reason why we maxed out the Voltorb and the Raichu, so that it's lower odds that you start that Koko Prism Star. That's the only small headache by playing a Lightning-based build of Greens, because Koko is too good of a card to not play, basically. Onto the energy then. We are playing 13. 9 basic lightning should be plenty for us to access early, have discard synergy if you want to early Koko alongside manually attaching, as well as having plenty remaining in the deck for you to be able to Electrode out of the deck. And Speed Lightning, you're going to maximize this card because we have such higher win percentages when you find early game, like greens, for example. It's just such an insane supporter card. When you do build around her, so just having extra draws that can get you towards those supporters going to be a really big deal for you. So the full list then is going to be pretty basic. Like most greens lists, they're quite linear. They're just hoping that your attacker gets the job done. Raichu has so many pitfalls for the opponent with the amount of hit points that it has. With the reset stamps, the hammers, and the dolls, it's just like so many things your opponent has to be constantly playing around with this 60, which is just like going to be a headache no matter what. For tech options then, we have seen Kabu be used recently in Green Centiscorch as a backup draw supporter when you are missing greens, for example, and this could do a similar thing in the deck. We've seen how effective Centiscorch has been able to use this card, and Kabu could again feature in this list if you really want to try it out. Alternatively, Pokegear as well is always a thing to just have better access to your greens. Team Yellgrunt, seeing as though you're already playing those Crushing Hammers, never going to be too detrimental to you. If you want to have a 1 count in here for extra energy removal, it could be a win condition in itself. For additional trainers in the Greens toolkit, I've definitely considered Energy Spinner and Great Catcher. They've kind of been floating in and out of the deck. At the moment, I'm not super committed to making space for these, but I know that these are traditional cards that you will see in Greens decks, so they're certainly worth experimenting with. And then for other lightning-based attackers, obviously, when you're playing Tag Call, even playing like 1 Pikarom as an option isn't too bad of a deal, because Tag Bolt can still be a huge headache for a ton of decks. But I'm expecting that Telescopic Sight is going to have enough of a stance in the format in some capacity that I'm expecting a little bit more Mew in the format, and especially if I was a 1-prize deck. I think any 1-prize deck that I'm playing right now will be playing Mew, and I would kind of only really want Pikarom in here for a couple of situations. One of them would be against 1-prize decks where you can Tag Bolt, and another situation would be having full bits to defend against energy removal combos, but against more energy removal based decks you can just try and blow up more Electrodes, I guess. So I feel like Pikarom can have too many downsides. I know this is still like one of the most insane cards in the game right now. It's hard to say that this card comes with so many downsides, but strictly focusing on the ADP matchup, Pikarom can be a liability, and if you do play the Pikarom, you'd have to commit more space to playing Big Charms just like straight away. Otherwise, he's just like game losing to lead him in that matchup. And there's also the option of Vikavolt V. I think the likes of, Bolton, Tapu Koko V, all of those other lightning box style attackers all come with their downsides, because you're then giving your opponent easier hit points to take the physical 6 prizes. That's why we're not playing the Vikavolt. But right now, ChuChu wouldn't have much hope against some of these other 1-prize decks without some item block options. So again, when you're so stamp focused, Paralyzing Bolt becomes a great defensive tool as well. So if you do feel like the Vikavolt can provide enough defense for you, then it may be worth squeezing in. But at the moment, we've gone as streamlined as possible. Onto the matchup overview then. I feel like the deck, the way it's built right now, as long as things are going well, I don't think you're ever like out of the game against any deck. That's just kind of the nature of Reset Stamp and Paralysis, and sometimes you are crossing your fingers. Obviously, there are times when it does come off. There are also times where your opponent just sort of like rips that research, hits the switch, hits the all this other stuff, and just gets over you or whatever. But there are plenty of situations where they just don't. They draw a blank. You're given that freedom of movement, and then you can finish off their attacker that you've previously paralyzed, and then you get into a far more dominant position from there and just sort of take over the board. And I think, there are so many multiple prize decks in the format, Eternatus, Centiscorch, ADP, all the Mewtwo variants, basically all the Frostmoth variants you should be pretty fine against. There's just so many multi-prizes around on the top tier right now, pre-Vivid Voltage, that anytime you buy 1 turn, it's like getting a free 3-prize knockout, and that's just pretty insane. So you can really make some big comebacks just off of that alone. I think really the only headaches are that we don't really have any answer to Altaria or Decidueye, so there's a horrific matchups. There are some one prizes out there that I'm afraid of, attacking Excadrill being sort of an up-and-coming deck pre-Vivid Voltage. Donphan Spiritomb should be horrific, as should Mad Party, realistically, because you can't do any... Well, I mean, you can do stamp plays against them, but they normally just set up the Poltergeists anyway, so they can get around that quite easily, and they naturally deck thin so well that by the time you've got your stamp combos working, you're only taking one prize knockouts as you go a lot of the time, or sometimes the Denes here and there. But they've already thinned their deck so much, and they have extra draws on top with their Polties that it's not going to be a problem for them to just do a traditional prize race. And then Colossal VMAX, for obvious typing reasons, is going to be an issue. I would expect most Colossals as well to naturally be looking towards having healing cards, so at least 2 Mallow Lanas. My own Colossal's playing 3, so that makes life more difficult for the Raichu for sure. And I also think the Rogue deck Clefable Dolls would also cause some headache for this kind of deck, because yes, you have like 3 Electrodes that you can try and blow up and get a bunch of energies onto like a couple of Raichus, and you do have some pivoting options. I do feel like the Dolls will be a big problem, and all of these Clefable spams will eventually catch up to you with such a high energy attack cost. It would be a huge issue. So yeah, I think for the current stuff in format, not too much fear. I think the fear is the wave of fighting decks could be coming into this format now. So that's something that you will have to sort of keep an eye on. For the closing thoughts then, I really do feel like this is going to be a headache of a deck. We've seen Green's Pikarom work in the past, where it was just using Boltund and Pikaroms. And now it feels like Electrode can be the new partner alongside Raichu to be a different way of energy accelerating, which can also lead into that stamp even more dangerously, where you can force your opponent down to 1 prize knockouts, down to 1 prize remaining, and then you can try and make your stamp para plays really go the distance, which I think is a pretty big deal. My only real headaches is that typing is going to be a problem in the format right now, and potentially the usual headaches of being a greens deck. When you're not hitting your greens, you're really just doing some mediocre options with like early Guzma Hala for Speed Lightning, or early Sinlin just to discard 1, draw 3, and that can be kind of rough times. So let me know what you think about Green's Electrode. Is it going to have a big place in the format? Do you think there are some certain item cards that I'm missing right now that should be included in the deck? What do you think about the amount of pivoting options, the amount of dolls I'm playing? These are all things that I've considered sort of chopping and changing. Would you work in any lightning style attackers? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Man, it's late. Cheers. Bye.